It is March the 3rd, Thursday of a crazy week. And this is a little bit of a shorter one because I really still think that despite the fact that we're getting some of the retail sales coming out, and it's so funny because it really is a war. It's like some are crushing it and some are clearly not crushing it, so to speak. Um, there's so much differentiation. But I think actually the thing that I focused on the most today really was the FOMC Senate meeting. And I will come up by next time with a few better slides to illustrate why I think that in times like this, it's really kind of important to hear what the talking heads are saying, because I think even if the VIX starts to weaken a little, we got to kind of figure out what these leaders are going to do, because thus far, I'm just going to call it. I know everybody is going to feel differently, but I do think this whole Ukraine issue is a diplomatic fail followed by a bunch of propaganda from like the entire world. And the only thing that actually matters is the people that are getting hurt and the people that potentially will get hurt. So I'm going to go through a little bit of what I'm seeing, and then I welcome any comments. You guys are my subscribers are seeing it right away, but if you hit the subscribe channel, if you're seeing this on YouTube, you'll get, as soon as we do release the videos in order, and that would be amazing. Comment below if you have questions or comments, but I always like to know what people are thinking. Here we go. These have been the themes that we've been playing all along. So this is what I was really looking for as relates to thinking about the Senate and House meetings that have happened these last 2 days. And they really almost went through everyone except for this long-term societal behavior. So that's the only pause. But these other things were kind of highly relevant. We'll get back to that. So these were the major topics that they covered. Energy, obviously, huge component of inflation. And we've been talking about this for like months, that raising interest rates isn't going to do anything to inflation. And if I ignore all the kind of juvenile behavior of trying to think about what we did in the past and have him unfortunately justify every single action he's taken, which I get kind of is what the Senate meetings are about, but they're so complex, it's a little silly. When it comes to energy, he reminds everybody that interest rates cannot lower the price of energy. And it's so funny because some of his biggest detractors refer from energy states. So he's like, well, what can we do to help you? He's like, yeah, if you could get more energy production to happen, that would be really great. A little bit of a segue there. We have talked about the fact that one of the biggest detractors is not that the price of oil is too low, but that the price of the futures that are farther out are too low. Again, very briefly, but it's in some of our earlier videos. What makes CapEx work in a lot of ways is that that if you're going to spend money today to increase that supply, that in the future you're going to actually be able to make money off the supply and the cost that you put in to having that energy come out of the ground. Now, up until really this week, unfortunately, so conspiracy theorists unfortunately will probably prevail for a little bit of time here. But really, up until these last few weeks, the back end of the curve has not been where it needs to be to either, for many countries, justify the oil price, or alternatively, just like alternatively make sense for what the environment actually is. So what is the environment? OPEC supplies are really, really tight. In general, we drew down because the oil price did like a $30 price and then just started moving up so aggressively. So there are all these dynamics, whereas even as recently as January, the companies that were reporting in late January were like, we're not going to raise CapEx right this minute, because right now, if I look at the back end of the curve back here, these prices were all like low 70s, meaning that once they actually paid for the hedge, no matter how creative their options guys got, their futures guys got, they were still going to lock in a price of oil like in the high 60s, something like this, right? More than one discussed where they would ultimately be forced to lock in the price of oil at, given like this crazy situation with OPEC, like ex-Russia and Ukraine, right? The later reporting companies were like, yeah, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to just try to, increase capacity according to what we see is economic on the back end of the curve. Now, this one we discussed, and you can just watch the past episodes, this was like still in the 70s, even last week. As you can clearly see, the market has brought that up as a desire and signaling to the energy company, hey, how about you increase production, so to speak. So I'm hoping that by next quarter, we'll start to really see production finally increase in the U.S. Still does not help matters. And many of the senators talked about the fact that really it was really interesting because depends if you're on Team Powell or if you're against Team Powell. But right now, everybody more or less wants him reconfirmed because, quite frankly, we know what he's done a good job. Let's just call it what it is, right? Despite everything that you might have on inflation, like if you really roll the tape to the moment, he's done a very calm, cool job of helping us through this situation. Okay. The thing is, we need to see more energy come out of the ground. I think we'll start to see more projects in that regard. The back end is up. And then I also kind of want to just show you this because EOG, which has been my favorite pick, now because valuations, now that everybody's come out, the valuations have mixed up again. And I still love EOG. Let me tell you, this thing is cheap, okay? It's like 20s, high 20s top line growth, over 50% bottom line growth, special dividend back. But it got really confusing, and I think they were really sensitive to how they communicated on this last call about whether or not they were going to buy back shares. Some investors got really angry at them. They're like, no, we're going to kind of like just conserve capital until we really understand the dynamic of the back end of the yield curve. So every single one of these calls is talking about the back end of the futures curve. Every single company talked about the fact that the curve was in backwardation and that was driving decision making. But EOG actually produced this, which, by the way, was only just shortly after, we knew that this was definitely going to escalate. This is like, so they already had this slide prep for the call, and you can see very clearly on it, it's a map of all the different spots that they're drilling in, and, it being piped down for export. And this means that they're going to either export it to the rest of the country, but let's just be honest, we know where they're exporting it to. Do you know what I'm saying? So there is that thing going on. And the other thing they did that was a little bit different than the other companies was that while all of them did a fair bit of CapEx and all of them did really thoughtful projects with what they could do and know that they weren't hurting investors to do it, EOG went and made some of its unproven reserves proved, and then became very clear on what the dollar value was that they would be profitable at, and it still clocks in somewhere at the 40s, which makes them still one of the lowest cost providers on the earth. So this is like a really, I'm still bullish on it. For folks that don't want to be in the options market, these guys are going to just probably kick back a dividend. Dividends are awesome. Do you know what I mean? Like this $100 stock, it gave a special dividend of $1. That's a big dividend. Do you know what I'm saying? That's just one quarter. So have a look at EOG, whether you're a stock player or an options player. If you're an options player, this thing is pretty volatile. So you can every now and then, like this morning, I think it actually tried to trade down below 115 and it's kind of made its little route back up. So just realize the average true range there and then watch it, monitor it, because I think it'll take a while for people to really come to terms with the fact that Europe doesn't really have that many sources that it can get its natural gas and oil to. All right, the second thing that we really talked about a lot was cyber attacks, okay? And that's companies like Fortinet, et cetera. Now, I haven't come out really aggressively on any of these. I think the position I took was on Norton LifeLock, NLOK. And I want to just take another look at it. They posted a great quarter. Fortinet, ticker FTNT, always tends to trade a little bit expensive, but they are a direct large cap play to security related to government firms because they do most of the, not most, there's actually a whole sea of companies, but they definitely do a lot of work with government security firms. It's just that on a valuation basis, we still have this secondary theme of people kicking out growth stocks like crazy, even though I think probably they'll grow right into them anyways. So Fortinet kind of scared me a little bit, whereas Norton LifeLock really is, it's affordable right there. I no longer have a position in that one because I literally just played it for earnings as, and sorry I didn't mention it, but it's a cheap dollar value name that you may want to take a look at. But cyber attacks was front and center. They really are consumer. They don't really do quite as much to businesses these days. But I will try to do something a little bit longer in the tooth there for everyone. And then The third thing that they talked about, because this is something that that Congress has a say on, so they had to like really get kind of aggressive with him on the missing members of the Fed. There's plenty of people for them to function correctly. It's just that because of all the scandals from last year, and this, he's just missing some people. And it was so weird because one of the senators was even like, I think we should go to like 5 Fed chairmen and we should just make it less political. And then, everyone gets a vote. And I was like, what are you trying to say? I don't know that that makes it less political. Like, we must have very different opinions of what political and less political means, but hopefully nothing changes to that. If it does change, I could see there being a little turmoil and uneasiness with that. I think if I was to read Jerome Powell's face, and honestly, I never want to play poker with this man because I will lose, because he's really good at just staying very poker faced. I think he just kind of was like, I'm acknowledging you. I'm not saying anything one way or the other. Probably not going to happen, so to speak. So just be aware that if you hear news flow on that, there definitely is a constituency that may be trying to push for that. I think it's crazy, but if it creates volatility in the markets, it's something to take note of. Okay, this one was a big one, and I think over the coming weeks, especially as we exit earnings season, and you know how CNBC in particular and the powers that be love to just kick up dirt whenever there's not actual news that they can report on. Can you raise interest rates during a time of war? And I don't know the answer to that. He again iterated that he felt in different spots that the market is pricing in like 5 or 6 hikes at this point, and that they were going to be very cautious and careful to not put any of America's interests at risk and execute this with thoughtfulness to what it might mean to have sanctions, what it might mean to have retaliations, all of that stuff. But the variation of scenarios, other than the basic ones, which they always do, is enough to where they are very closely monitoring whether or not any raising in interest rates puts us at any kind of meaningful risk. Now, the next thing, labor supply and supply chain issues. This is where Congress, oh my gosh, it's almost hard to listen to, but it is something that affects all of us. This is gonna, I think, also dominate the news flow channels and create volatility. But labor supply is really tight. And some of the spending policies do involve trying to help women get back to work. And, it really is stuff like people, if you don't have childcare, then it is actually very hard for you to like go back to work. I don't know another way to say it. I think the ladies understand this really well. And the guys that also are active parenting understand this one clear as day. Like you gotta kids first, right? Like, let's call it what it is. And then many of the different states representatives, both in the Senate and the House, had a lot to say about jobs and what that might mean on the supply chain issue side. He talked once again that oil, interest rates can't help things that are structural. Raising interest rates can potentially help with demand, but it's hard. So like definitely we've talked about oil, food, interest rates, donut, right? Okay, like can't do anything about that. We got to increase supply, and that's usually a market function because those two are in fact commodities. Realizing that for us, we are again long mosaic because fertilizer is how you make more food. That's just part of the whole deal. Like we really benefited from the incredible folks in that industry, despite any kind of criticism that an industry also receives. So be aware of that. And again, we love fertilizer, but specifically we like phosphate and potash ever so slightly better. With nitrogen, I am also long nitrogen company CF Industries, and that is because I'm going to get to that in a little bit as to why, but I do think that's a little bit of a tougher, obvious yes. I think it's a yes because the current climate is the way it is. But I will go into that in just a little bit. And then the last Oh, but like semiconductors, here's the issue. Usually the market mechanism would take care of that because obviously if there's that much demand, the autos would charge more and they would just make more production. They obviously can only make as many cars as they have the right semiconductors to make them with. So, there's kind of a cap on anything that interest rates can do, although potentially it will decrease demand. I mean, it's really kind of a big unknown because if your car breaks down, your car breaks down. It is your way for a lot of Americans of making money. So there's only you got me. Okay. The last thing is something that we talked about, so I really feel vindicated on this because this is not talked about. We had talked about early in January quarter that the U.S. was doing significantly better to weather and was significantly stronger than other countries. And we showed slides from American Express. We showed slides from, let me go on. We showed slides from, this was American Express, and we were seeing the difference between U.S. versus international regains. I have some other slides. I'll find them another time. Here was UPS daily volumes were more or less recovered on the U.S. side. Not so much like recovering for sure in the right direction, but not nearly as high as what we were seeing in the United States. So, and then I think the other one, which isn't quite here, was something that was published out of Boeing's earnings report about air traffic and how there was more flights that were happening in the U.S. such that you were almost like fairly close to 2019 levels, and that just didn't look anything like that once you went internationally. And so we have been hypothesizing that this is true. I don't think you could be the Fed chairman's going to have more research than I'm going to have as far as that goes. He confirmed it was true. So I really just want you to realize that this whole war situation, and part of the reason why I think it's such a failure in diplomacy, is because, like, it's a really terrible, it's like, it's just, we're still in the middle of winter, so there's still a demand for oil. We're right at the beginning of planting season. And then also, a lot of countries were experiencing runaway inflation, but we're not necessarily recovering as quickly as the United States. So let me just throw that out there. But that is something to also think about from an investment perspective. I have always been sensitive to shorting the U.S. indices because, like I said, 60 to 70%, like really it's high 60s, mid 60s of the companies that report the S&P are doing great. They're not just doing okay, they're doing great. And then we've got quite a few that I think will probably fix the problems in the next quarter. And then we do definitely have some dispersion and differentiation, but America doesn't look bad. And I really think that that's something that is going to be a really big deal, especially if this war situation continues in any kind of meaningful amount of time. Okay. Now, things that we did not talk about on these congressional calls that I think were a missed opportunity for leadership. I'm just going to call them out, right? But also, like, it would have really given the public a bit more, like, this is what I'm thinking as your leaders, is they did not talk about military. Okay. And the reason I think this is so vital is, although we are part of NATO, this thing is being fought on European soil. And as we have talked about before, Germany, France, pretty much all the EU countries have, largely speaking, underspent in the way of military. And I'm just going to call it out because it was supposed to be like 2% of GDP. I think Germany tried to get it all the way down much farther. I'm showing in my records that their military spend is closer to like 50 billion, same thing for France, etc. So largely speaking, they're kind of dependent on us if it becomes a troop battle to get in there and do some things. And I mean, that's a real, as much as we want to, we want world peace, there's real American lives that potentially could be at risk. And I would love for the senators to tell me that's not true, or tell me what they're negotiating on behalf of America if we do send in our boys and girls of the military, because I don't love it. I'm just going to say I need somebody to have a conversation with America on this, because I think it's actually a really big deal. You know what I mean? If we're going to go in and fight somebody else's war, we better get something for it. I'm just saying, you do whatever you want as far as financially preparing yourself and financially positioning your portfolio, but I'm going to call it out. Okay. Also, I am starting to see both in the Senate and the House a little bit of warmongering towards China, which I think doesn't help any situation. I don't want to go into the politics of all of this, but honestly, I think until we kind of like exhaust all options, it would be really nice to try to figure out a diplomatic solution and work together. And I actually think that there is an alternative to just assuming that China is our enemy that does in fact help us. Because if you look at it, oh, sorry. Um, if you look at it, this is China's Belt and Road Initiative, right? And then this huge, gigantic country on top of China, that kind of looks like is Russia. So I mean, if you're China and a huge, gigantic border that you have is Russia, you kind of gotta be diplomatic in how you play, as far as things go. Now, remember, China does have the largest standing army in the world, but they also have 14 countries that border them, and not the least of which is the antagonism that we give them all the time. But we're not going to go there, okay? But like, there's probably a way to work with this country to create solutions so that Europe isn't delayed on this particular situation. And I would hope that diplomacy would prevail over just, hey, let's start warmongering against China here in the United States. It's not cool, guys. It's not cool. Is what I'm saying. So just realize that in general, China does have trade routes that they care about through Europe. But either way, I think they benefit. I'm just going to say it like it is, unfortunately. I don't think it's the way they like to benefit. Additionally, China stockpiled its fertilizer. We believed originally that they were stockpiling it because they really are running out of energy and they kind of they're still a net importer of energy. I'll show you that chart. It's this one, right? So even though China produces a whole lot of oil, which is the black line, they use more than they consume by a lot, is because of that gigantic population they've got. And that's the big green line around here. Actual numbers. Oh, by the way, if you're a subscriber, the actual numbers are in Discord. All of this information I publish in the Discord so that you can check my facts and you can see where they're coming from to see if you agree with them. Everything public, not trying to hide anything, guys. So anyways, this I kind of hate seeing, that's really kind of the update there. Okay, and I mentioned that I would show a little bit more on this issue of, I think that actually takes us through what I have prepared today. Let me pause for a second to see if there's any questions. Hey guys, any questions?
I may, in reference to oil, the price of oil stocks versus the price of oil.
Yeah.
I've read and heard over and over again that oil stocks are priced at $60 a barrel currently.
They are 100%. It's been driving me insane since $80. Like, yes, like I can almost justify pricing them at $60 if the back end of the curve is still at 70, right? Because you still got to account for hedges, you got to account for this, you got to account for that. But like, that's why I think we got to watch the back end very carefully, because if you're still pricing at 60 and projects are like 2 years out and they've clearly now hedged out those projects at like 80, then this is just stupid at this point. Do you know what I mean? Like, come on. Do you know what I'm saying? And all of these companies give great dividends. Go ahead.
Right. I think they're just pessimistic.
I know, it's really weird. And the thing that it's everything you're saying is truth. And I think it's really interesting because occasionally I'll have my little conversations with folks and I want the environment to be better. Please don't think that this excitement for the energy price because I happen to be long is anything other than that. I just think it's the wrong way to do it. And I really, here, let me actually show what just happened this last year. My issue isn't that I don't want Biden to improve the environment and use his power. My issue isn't that I don't that I have any kind of feelings politically towards one party or the other. And my issue is not that I don't think that we should continue to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels. My issue is this wasn't the way to do it. There's lots of different possibilities. This is the equivalent of taking I feel bad, but look, I grew up in the dirty, poor South too, so I got people that had to experience this as well. This is the equivalent of taking a multi-decade year alcoholic and trying to take them off cold turkey and assuming that they're not going to have any health issues, right? There's a reason why you have to go to a center and that we now have drugs to try to make sure that you don't die, and they hook you up to machines to make sure that you don't die, okay? That's because there is a better way to do it, and the energy companies in fairness, have talked about it on their calls. They've tried to work with President Biden on it. He just hasn't done it. It just hasn't prevailed. And I know that the environmental people are going to pound the table so aggressively with their belief that this is like just a near-term shock, the same way that you'd experience it if you were coming off of some kind of substance abuse. But like I said, there's more than one way. There's a humane way to do it, and then there's the way you have to, last time I checked, we have first world country, so not driving up the oil price on everyone that lives paycheck to paycheck, could we not do that? But let me just show you. I was like, look, if you're thinking that this was the best way to do it without polluting, then let me just show you. We used coal. We have not always used coal, but we've been using coal this entire period. We had to use oil, which we don't usually have to use because the price of LNG was so high, it made more sense to do this. Additionally, this is the coal usage last year increase. Okay, so this was when nat gas was really low, oil was at 30 bucks. Here's what's happened in 2021. Here are the numbers in raw form. You got a huge increase in 2021, and we're pretending like that's going to come down in 2022. Shocker, this was published before the war on Ukraine, so I don't know how, we got to get, it's a really imperfect world, but it is 100% the case that CO2 emissions, coal versus nat gas, every day of the week, nat gas, right? And I just can't believe that this administration has not been open-minded to the idea that we can just switch the 10% of coal to nat gas and very quickly improve the emissions situation while we give time for the infrastructure build for all the other stuff that has to happen. All the utility companies that have come out are absolutely doing things to try to improve reliance on alternative forms of energy versus oil and even nat gas, for sure. But if you just go utility company 10K through utility company 10K or 8K, because sometimes it's published there too, you will see that the percentage of energy and power that is created from alternatives is so ridiculously low relative to what is being done in oil and nat gas. And that's not because these companies don't want to do it. Of course they want to do it, It's really because it just takes time to build that infrastructure, put it up, and then also, essentially, you just got to build the infrastructure and store it, And we are definitely, and that was the other thing that both the nat gas companies and the utility companies talked about. So it's not like they're not hand in hand, right? And they're not hand in hand trying to hurt us, by the way, okay? But they're like, look, we just need time to be able to create the storage so that we can actually then have it be valuable to most of the United States. And if you're a coastal area, if you're Florida, great state of Florida has done a lot to try to get better at this, you know what I'm saying? If you're the great state of Arizona, you got all that beautiful desert that potentially, if you work it out with the American Indians, they'll let you put some solar panels on, all these wonderful states that have access to this immediate alternative, thumbs up. If you're in the middle of the country, that may not be a possibility, is all I'm saying. If you're in the Northeast, okay, maybe not. Oh, sorry, that was a long answer. Go ahead.
So the policies, the energy policies, which clearly were political, right, created a supply shortage. Would you agree?
That's how I'm telling the story, and everything in my research report supports that. I know that the environmentalists have a different story that they're telling, and I think that on viewers, because this issue is so sensitive, viewers should make their own, you make your own decision on that. But largely speaking, I'm happy to give you, especially if you're a subscriber, you'll see in the Discord, but I am showing you all of the stuff that I'm looking at. and it doesn't look good.
Well,
It really looks
yeah,
bad as relates to
the truth is oil is shot up. I mean, and it's not because of
exactly.
Ukraine.
I agree. And then, just as recently as 2 days ago, he denied more drilling in the Gulf of Mexico, right? Like, we at war, friend. You know what I'm saying? like, and it might have just been that with all the other stuff happening, this one just was on autopilot to be denied. But you see, yeah, yes, I don't know another way to say it. These are policy decisions that are affecting Americans in a particularly nasty way, but the news media doesn't want to really talk about it that way. Occasionally on CNBC, you'll get an energy analyst who will try to, as gently as possible, suggest it, say it, and hint to where you'd find all of the information for it. But I don't know.
Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions? Alternative solutions, my friend. I am not saying destroy the environment. I'm saying there's more than one way to skin a cat. Don't skin any cats. I love cats. All right, if that's it, I am going to go ahead and pause the show. We'll keep it short today. Thanks for viewing, and I'll see you next time, guys.